We're all about those number ones. This week on the Byword, we're looking at 4 brand new launched comic series. Are they good or are they stinkers? The Byword starts now. Ladies and gentle nerds, welcome to a new episode of the Nerd Byword podcast, episode 167. Now that we have survived a whole month of 90s tinged nostalgia with our Amalgam month, it is time to look at some more modern comics. How modern? Brand new launched number ones. But before we get there, it's time for... All right, Chris, what's new?
Well, we've got some good news. As of the time of recording, the WGA has reached an agreement with the motion picture companies. They have basically got everything that they wanted, Dave. The reason that they strike for, I believe, 164 days. They have higher pay. They have the minimum staffing on writers' rooms. They have protections against AI, that AI cannot produce a script. They cannot edit scripts, which is wonderful. And then the coolest thing that I'm most excited about is the success-based residuals. So what we've been clamoring for ages is if something is streamed 200 million times, that should be a quantifiable thing, and you should be able to reward the people who are behind that successful project, and not just some flat rate that would garner them the same amount as something that did not perform well. So this is very, very exciting. Now, as of the time recording, SAG-AFTRA is set to meet in the next day or so to try and negotiate as well. So here's hoping, Dave, that sunnier days are on the horizon when it comes to our entertainment, and that unionization and worker strikes are effective negotiation tactics.
Yeah, by the time this airs, it's very possible that a lot of this has already been settled, since we like to record, at least a couple of weeks ahead of time. But this is really exciting news. Like, in the here and now, I don't know what things are looking like in the future when you're listening to this, folks, but in the here and now, this is a really, really exciting prospect. Not the least of which, and Chris and I have already talked about this, we have kind of tried to avoid as much new content as possible in the realm of, movies and television. But my God, there are a couple of things we'd really like to talk about here pretty soon. And so it would be nice to be able to do that again. But I'm so pleased that the deal looks to be so favorable towards what the writers have been asking for. Because it goes to show that, when there is a will to do these things, the big corporations in Hollywood definitely can pony up. The big studios can treat their creatives well when, literally they're not given any other choice. It's sad that we had to go through this massive strike, right? But at the very least, at this point, we know that this is the method. This is the way, as the Mandalorian would say. So maybe the actors are going to be able to level the same strategies to get what they think is fair in their new contract, and then we can get back to the business of just like enjoying some really good content being created out of that part of the industry. So I'm cautiously optimistic that the striking days are going to be behind us soon at this point, and that this is just the first domino in a series of dominoes that are going to fall to bring everybody back into the fold and back to work. So I'm excited for the content that lays on the horizon, Chris.
Now, Dave, one of the reasons that writers and actors are so stringent on protection against AI is to avoid some of the hogwash like you have in your news story.
Yeah, so a recent social media post shared a Batman comic, and I put comic here really in quotation marks, that was created through AI generation. So OpenAI's latest image generation model, which is DALL-E 3, was just recently released as of this recording, and people have been already playing around with it to see what it can, do to create quote unquote AI art. An individual on Twitter or X or whatever you want to. Oh, we're calling it Twix. Yeah. So,
Twix.
So a user on Twix shared a 4-page comic, basically, of Batman, and posted OpenAI's latest image generation model, DALL-E 3, makes it so, all caps for so, easy to create comic books. Here are 4 panels for fan-made Batman comic made in under 5 minutes. Prompts included in the alt text. Enjoy with a little fire emoji. Needless to say, the comic book industry has been quick to turn its back on this particular post, especially because there's much to critique, especially since these panels. So they feature a Batman that looks shocked, surprised, and is yelling for Robin. Then you see a close-up of the Joker laughing, a Batmobile racing along, and then you see the Joker threatening Robin. The Joker in particular is very, very clearly imitating the Joker design from Brian Bolland and Mike Allred. It is so obvious for people who know anything about comic books and about the history of the Joker character. It is so obvious and in your face, it's ridiculous. It's also very clear that the Batman model used is very clearly sort of Adam West inspired, right? It's probably based on some art from the Batman 66 comic book. So, AI does what AI does, right? It is using real art and just remixes it, so human art remixed is all this thing really does. Needless to say, there's been a whole bunch of artists that have been really critical on social media about this. Javier Rodriguez, for example, was one of them. He said you could do the same thing a while ago with a photocopier and some scissors. Stealing other people's art seems easier now and lucrative for those behind generative models. Ramon Villalobos, probably Villalobos. I'm trying to work on my pronunciation. This bleep is a mess. Batmobile switches designs between panels 1 and 2, and Joker clearly is swiped, and the style is inconsistent throughout. Not surprising, art enthusiasts think it's a huge achievement, though, because they are complete dummies. Comic book writer Daniel Kibblesmith also mocked the results online. He posted, bleep, it looks exactly like a computer churning out a dog bleep impression of a Batman comic. You guys did it! Comic book writer Sarah Horrocks called out the use of balance work in particular, actually. It is so obvious, man, it's not even funny. That's literally just Brian Bolland's Joker. The shamelessness of this technology is appalling. I guess it's okay to steal, just call it AI. And, there's been dozens of, comic book pros, people from the indie scene that have all sort of lined up on social media to decry this. And get generally responses from these, AI bros who are like, no, man, it's just leveling the playing field, Now, okay, so, I'm just gonna like keep it real for a second. I am a comic book writer, and not a particularly successful one, but I write comic books, and I understand that I am 100% dependent on how artists interpret my scripts. It is the equivalent of writing a Hollywood movie and then handing it off to a group of people, a director, actors, casting directors, all of these people that then collaboratively create the finished work of art. If you are not prepared as somebody who wants to create comic books to either A, learn to be a good artist, or B, rely on the collaborative process to create a finished piece of art, then you have no business in the comic book industry. Because those are the two routes. There are no shortcuts. And what AI is creating is not original work. We have to once and for all accept that the way AI works at this point is simply that these companies feed it art, and AI basically remixes it. It learns from real human beings' art and just remixes it. Without the human art, this stuff would not happen, which means that this is theft, plain and simple. This is not a shortcut to becoming a comic book creator. This is theft. And just because the law has not caught up yet to the technology doesn't mean it's not theft, right? And the law will catch up. Laws are notoriously slow to catch up to this kind of stuff, but they will catch up. And there will be rules governing the kind of stuff that you can feed into these AI models. And copyrighted works are not going to be on the menu forever. And then these people are going to very quickly realize if they can't create art to begin with to feed into this AI model, then the AI model is useless. It is a house of cards built on theft, plain and simple. There are no shortcuts to becoming a comic book professional. There are no shortcuts to becoming a writer. There are no shortcuts to becoming an artist. There are no shortcuts for creativity. That's just it. You go through the process. And I will say that as somebody who has written, comic book stories before, I am glad that the comic book medium is a collaborative process. I am glad I can't just feed, a prompts into an AI model and it spits out exactly what I asked for. Because the creativity of the artists that I have collaborated with alone over the last year have improved every single idea I had vastly. Because they bring their own perspective and their own ideas to the table. And that collaborative process improves the artistic work. Plain and simple. So I would not use, even if this wasn't theft, I would not use an AI model to help me create a comic book story. I would not, because I would be missing out on this collaborative process. That's the cornerstone of what makes creating comic books different from writing, prose. It's the collaboration. It's not just, hey, it's got pretty pictures. It's the writer, the artist, the colorist, the letterer, all coming together to create something unique, each bringing their own talents to the table. And so I find this, frankly, offensive. I think it's completely counter to what the comic book industry is about, what comic book creation is about. In addition to being theft, it's just offensive to the creative process. Plain and simple.
Yeah, and I liken it to, it's pretty sad, Dave, because this is a lesson that I have to teach to my students who are children, as to when they're in a foreign language classroom, why they cannot simply copy and paste into an online translator. Okay? Because there are statutes built through whatever educational institution you have about academic integrity. And integrity being the quintessential word there, the most important paramount word there is integrity. Okay? And so when a 15, 16-year-old child, copies and pastes something because they just want to take the easy way out, they want to just get it done, and they're met with the disappointment of being called out on it, okay, why have we not learned our lesson from that? And why are we still having to teach the same lesson to grown adults? And so, what made you think that this was art? What made you think that this was something unique that you have contributed to pop culture, to society? Something that was rooted in someone else's work. You did nothing to contribute that, other than copying and pasting or just dumping it into this generator. What was your contribution? And so, it's sad that we have to have the same discussion that I have with children as an educator, as a role model, as someone who is trying to prepare them for the future in a world where if you're writing a research paper, you cannot just plagiarize. And we're fighting this on the education front as well, AI, with ChatGPT and all this nonsense. And all the different educational institutions have really had to ramp up and be very clear. If this is found, these are the repercussions, whatever. And then we're trying to teach this to children to kind of set them on the right path, all the while adults are doing the same thing.
And I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Like, I am not one of those never AI bros either. Like, I think there are things.
They're the same idiots that told us to buy these NFTs, and how did that work out for them? The same idiots that told us to invest in Bitcoin. How is that working out for them?
Look, the thing to remember, in my opinion, is this: a new technology's job is supposed to be to make our lives easier, and it should enable us to do work. Does that make sense? It is not supposed to replace humans, right? Streamline
the work process. Yes.
So, for example, I've been reading up on how AI is being used in education, right? So the big thing when you're looking at AI in education is generally complaints about, students trying to use AI to generate essays and to cheat and all that. And no doubt that is a problem, right? No doubt. However, I also think that there are things you can do with it legitimately. For example, I think it's very interesting that you can take a piece of text and level it to a particular reading level, So the idea that you can take a text as a teacher that you're trying to use with students, and you can say, okay, this kid is struggling, so I can level this at a second or third or fourth grade reading level, that is useful, right? Because you are still doing the work. The student is still working with the text, but you have now lowered the reading level so it is appropriate for that kid. That's genius, right?
That would be no different than you and I, like a student has a one-on-one and they need us to explain that in simpler terms, in layman terms, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And so that kind of stuff AI is absolutely genius for. But it should not replace human.
And in that scenario, it should not replace people. In that scenario, you're calling it what it is. You're not claiming that it's something else entirely. You're not claiming that it's some new life that you've created.
Exactly. You're saying, hey, there's this piece of text and I leveled it down for you, so using AI to make sure that you can understand it. And now we're talking,
I have, for example, I have a student who cannot read English, okay? Cannot read English. I use Google Translate to translate websites that we're using. So he has equal accessibility to that. I'm not claiming that this is a new creative work that he and I have created together.
Exactly. That's what I keep trying to say here. It's not about... It is not about we don't want AI at all. It's anything technology-wise can be used in a useful way or in a destructive way. And I just happen to believe that trying to steal other people's art, remix it using AI, and then passing it off as some kind of great original creation, that is a destructive use of the technology.
Now, what about the TikToks where you have SpongeBob singing "Don't Stop Believing"?
I hate you right now.
Or Plankton.
It's Journey, man. You can't replace Steve Perry.
I heard. I think Plankton singing Peaches.
I am going to need therapy after that. That's why I'm not on TikTok much. I think that sums it up perfectly right there. All right, folks, there you have it. That's it from Nerd News. Stick around because we are about to discuss some brand new comic books and whether they are worth a read. All right, ladies and gentlemen, nerds, we're back, and it is time for this week's Big Talk. And I'm really excited for this one because we're looking at some new comic books being released with fresh number ones. On the menu today will be...
He's also excited because it's majority DC books.
I mean, majority? There's 2 out of the 4. I mean, that's 50%.
And there's only one Marvel, so 25%.
Oh, that's because you came along with a non-DC or Marvel book here. So
I did.
That one's on you, man.
I laid that. I say, listen, the sacrifices that I make for this podcast.
So we got Wonder Woman number 1, Captain America number 1, The Flash number 1, and Rare Flavours number 1. So 2 DC books, a Marvel book, and a book from Boom Studios. We're going to go ahead and start with Wonder Woman number 1. Wonder Woman number 1 is written by Tom King with art by Daniel Sampere? Sampere? I feel always so embarrassed that I don't know how to pronounce names. In this story, you have a Wonder Woman who becomes sort of ostracized from the superhero community as she becomes wanted by the U.S. government for a very interesting set of circumstances. Kris, I'm very interested to hear your take on this. I know you're not as deep into Wonder Woman lore as I am, but I'm very interested to hear your take on this new number 1 because it seems like a very new an interesting direction for Wonder Woman. And that cliffhanger definitely raised some questions.
Well, so what I appreciated about this book, I wish I could say the same about the other DC book, is that it is very new reader friendly. Now, I do have some connective tissue because a friend of the show, Stephanie Williams, was writing Nubia, so I've done all that. Also, Daniel Sampere's Nubia looks gorgeous in this book. So yeah, this one, I really enjoyed this book, with the caveat that as an X-Men fan and given the current state of X-Men comics, I opted for Rare Flavours as my second pick because, number 1, our beloved Kamala Khan's number 1 was a good deal about a month or 2 ago. So I feel like that was a little bit too far to punt back. And also it's just depressing, after the Hellfire Gala, and we were, the snake eating its own tail with X-Men comics of they're the other, they're bad, and all that jazz. So I did get similar vibes from that. So that's the one caveat I had about this, is it can create interesting conflict, but I don't love the idea of women in this scenario being othered. That made me a bit uncomfortable. But at the same time, it's so really well done. And I think this might be my first Tom King book that I've read, but given what I know of his background is ex-CIA, if I understand correctly. So that military geopolitical kind of Bond-esque kind of thriller comes through here. Really well done. There was one moment that was really hard to watch, where you have a mother that is gunned down, an Amazonian mother is gunned down. It was really tough to watch, but the art absolutely is out of this world. Great stuff. I'm absolutely intrigued to watch this story continue. There's just so many good character moments in this. I love the panels where we're at the Lincoln Memorial Washington Monument, that reflection pool, and we have the panel work is really creative. And then, like you said, the cliffhanger is going to be really interesting. And the fact that we have the adversary narrating the entire time was a really fascinating storytelling device, in my opinion.
And in media res, I mean, if it's very clear that he mentions repeatedly that Wonder Woman defeated him, right? He's looking back on a defeat story here. So it's bold as a storytelling device, if you ask me, to say up front, this is how it's going to end. Let me show you how we got here. Because a part of the mystery then is gone. And I think with serialized storytelling in particular, the mystery of what happens next is
similar
to
what sorry to interrupt, but similar to what we saw with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre last week.
Exactly. They come out and they say this is what's going to happen, right? And then they still manage to tell a really compelling story. Yeah, and I don't feel bad about like going full spoilers on this, you know. So
Okay, good.
I think we definitely need to really talk about it. I think you're right that Tom King has a tendency of getting a little political in his work, right? I mean, he does want to discuss societal issues and all this stuff. Um, and I think that's really interesting in his writing. Does it always hit the way you would hope? No, I don't think so. I don't think he's necessarily like a flawless, perfect writer or something. However, I think
He's the
that
one that
this
did
one really
Heroes in
does hit.
Crisis. He did Heroes in
Yeah,
Crisis that you did not
and
enjoy,
it took.
right?
No, I it took me a long time to forgive Heroes in Crisis. Um, but then I think was it not Tom King that also did the Supergirl book I loved so much?
Yes, Woman of Tomorrow. Hmm.
Woman of Tomorrow. So that was the moment where I forgave him for Heroes in Crisis, right? There are things he does. He takes. You know what? Let's talk about Dan Slott for a second, who recently posted something about to the effect that on X Twix that we cannot be mad at writers for doing things we don't like with characters or something because it's the writer's job to take big swings. And my response to that was that that's fine, but I don't think in many properties writers necessarily take big swings. A lot of writers play it pretty safe these days with these superhero properties. But I think King generally takes big swings. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Now, am I 100% sure that this is going to work beyond this first issue? I don't know, man. I don't know where the story is going, which is in itself really nice, right? But I think that there is definitely something working in this first issue. It does provoke an emotional response, right? I mean, you have the situation of this Amazon appears to basically kill a bunch of guys in a bar, right? And that is sort of the first initial incident that leads the US government to basically say we're going to expel all Amazons forcefully if we have to. And that chain of events is heartbreaking in places, right? It definitely creates an emotional response. And that's kind of in contrast to the almost ridiculous nature of the last page reveal, which is that this adversary is basically the King of America, who has been like ruling from the shadows and nobody knows he exists, right? And so there is certainly a very comic book silliness
Which
to that.
given the state of being, a citizen of the United States, would be the least surprising reveal in some days.
There are days where you wonder, right?
Yeah.
So it feels very comic book silly in that respect, but so much of the rest of the book feels very, very grounded in a um this could happen. Take the Amazons out of the equation and name any other group of people, and suddenly this becomes almost haunting. And I am sure if we go on social media right now.
Some of that subtext becomes textual with the two mothers in that household. Some of
Very
that,
much so.
there is some really, really abrasive language given there.
And I will say that you and I both know that if we go on social media right now and look up the discourse around Wonder Woman #1, there's at least one person who's already said, "Oh, Wonder Woman's gone woke." Right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, you and I both know that this is part of the conversation because as soon as you try to have serious, um, societal analysis as part of your storytelling,
World
which is a
outside
very,
your
very
window,
old.
if you will.
Yeah, yeah. Then you immediately have a section of the fandom that's like, that's too political, right? Um, but I think this one gets a really good, strong emotional response. I feel like superhero stories are very bam bam slap people around, and oftentimes you don't get a strong emotional response for them.
Mm-hmm.
If you can create a story that creates an emotional response in somebody, I think that's the right track. So I'm very curious to see where this is going, Kris.
Yeah, and I think that's like my greatest frustration with what's happening in X-Men comics right now, because there are so many large groups of people who can relate to those characters, can relate to their experience, and then to kind of have that waylaid. You look at the Hellfire Gala and you have the most diverse X-Men team in history, and then on the very next page they're brutally murdered, dismembered. It's really kind of hard to kind of forgive that. As strong as some of the storytelling might be, as interesting as some of the plot threads that ripple out from that might be, it's really hard to forgive that. And so it's definitely an intriguing one to watch here. And I another eye roll towards Dan Slott to kind of circle back to what you were saying. It's just like, that's such a Dan Slott thing to say. Like, you can't criticize art. Like, we have art critics. Like, nothing is ineffable. Like, I think about the James Baldwin quote. Like, if I love something, I'm going to criticize it because I want it to be better. And I'm paraphrasing. That was a bad paraphrasing. But, like, I love Spider-Man, and I'm going to critique it. You know? Like, and as big swings as you can take, similar to the Texas Chainsaw thing, similar to this Wonder Woman storyline, is like, when you're in an intellectual property like Spider-Man, like Wonder Woman, that's this, to borrow your phrase, long in the tooth, you know that the big swings are going to swing right back. At some point, we're going to go back to the status quo. And it's just like, are you going to enjoy the ride while you get there? And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. And I have no ill will towards, like, writers that I just don't enjoy their storyline, but it feels such as like a disingenuous thing to be like, don't say mean things to me on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that brings us to our next book. Let's switch over.
Real
to
quick,
the Marvel
one note. I want to pinpoint, like, the perfection of the sad boy dad who's just like, see, this is the problem men are having in this country. Like, that was perfect.
I actually like that scene so much because of how it contrasts with the daughter. Like, yes, the back and forth.
And that was such a smart, like, this is my idol. I love Wonder Woman. All the while, your dad is an incel. Sorry.
Yeah, that back and forth was perfect. Talk about a father who is oblivious to the impact that a person is having on his kid, right?
Or your words and actions and your sentiments toward women have towards you being a father of a young girl.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, so a second book that we're wanting to talk about is J. Michael Straczynski and Jesus Saiz on Captain America #1. Now, I think it's fair to say that you and I both have sort of soft spot for Straczynski's run on Spider-Man, yeah?
Indeed.
So seeing him back in the Marvel fold and on Captain America of all characters has been an interesting feeling. I'm very curious to hear what your take was on this one.
So, like, I love, as you said, I love the JMS Spider-Man run. I can't wait to get to his Thor run because I've heard great things from you and others about it. And Captain America is one of those characters that I kind of just like have this peripheral appreciation for. Like, sometimes he is counterintuitive to my beloved X-Men, and so, like, I'm like, all right, Steve, kind of an eye roll. But, like, for the most part, I kind of vibe with Steve Rogers. And so seeing one of my favorite writers on this character is really, really cool. But you know me is like the not necessarily anti-nostalgia, but like be careful about nostalgia guy. Like, that's kind of the seat I've painted for myself here on this podcast. But, like, so it's always like a skeptical when it comes to, like, the greatest generation type of situation. But, like, I really dug this book. I thought it was really cool, kind of like to strip down Steve to his most base characteristics and the man inside the super soldier, if that makes sense. Like, taking care of his neighborhood. And I was a little bit eye rolly of like, oh, my mom lived in this building and stuff. For like, okay, you can move though. You can leave. As someone who's moved a lot in their lives, you and I both can appreciate this. Like, okay, all right, you can't go home again sometimes, but there were the other people living in the tenement as well that were being unjustly ousted. So, like, I did appreciate that. The art on this just absolutely sings. I loved it. The black and white stuff was cool. The flashback to present day, like, had this kind of connective tissue in terms of the art. Um, and then this is so similar to like the early Spider-Man days of like where he's broke and trying to make ends meet and do it and whatever it takes, and then you have like a side quest with the Fantastic Four that was kind of cool. But I thought this was like a really strong start of what the story is that JMS wants to tell. I'm not sure how long he plans to be on the book, so like how long this is gonna be a thing. But I'm definitely intrigued to kind of see where this storyline goes, especially like the major arc. Kind of see what happens there. That was kind of some sci-fi shiftiness, almost like an Indiana Jones thing.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some interesting stuff going on in this book. Straczynski
And
is
that
so
last page,
good.
that last page, whew.
Yeah, I think Straczynski is so good to at getting to the heart of a character, and he's been always really good in his work when it comes to, um, I guess, just representing what a person is like, what a character is like in their everyday life, right? Taking a step back and not just doing super heroics.
For
And
me,
much
for
of
me,
this,
he's the greatest. He's the greatest reason why. He's the greatest argument for Peter and MJ being together. For me, I
he
think
he he
I think
definitely is a
Doomed.
guy who.
I think Doomed Affairs is the most underappreciated arc in all of Spider-Man comics. That stuff where it's like the side by side where he goes to L.A. to find her, to like chase after her. She goes back to New York, and you have those side by sides. It's some of the most heartbreaking like stuff that you'll ever see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what he does here is very much sort of in that vein. Like he just kind of spends a lot of time with Steve not even being Captain America. We get a couple of really good scenes. Like we get the beginning chase, and we get a scene where he does, comes back from being out with the Fantastic Four and foils that robbery, right? But the book is predominantly focused on really, I guess you could say, just like his relationships with people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the way he interacts with the other tenants in the building, the way he interacts with the guy who helps save him, and then he hires him to do construction, right?
His
Like,
conversation with Tony was fun.
yeah, I think it's very much a character study, and I think that's why the flashbacks were so interesting too. Now, you and I both know the way this works, right? Like the flashbacks are not just there to illuminate character. Very clearly, whatever happened to Cap in his early days there,
It's revealing
before he
plot
became
points.
Captain
Yeah.
America, is going to come full circle and somehow link in with whatever is going on with
I've seen
this
this
new
story
villain, right?
before. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is not just, hey, I want to show you what Captain America was like as a kid, but um that too was interesting, like we know a fair deal of Captain America's youth. Like that's like comic book legend at this point. Everybody knows, a young scrawny kid, loses parents, ends up with with the army, can't get signed up, joins the super soldier program, right? But Straczynski kind of finds some interesting places in between the broad strokes that we know. And I'm very interested to see not just where the present day storyline is going, but also how that is going to loop back and connect to his past, because I feel like we're getting sort of a quote unquote untold chapter
You know what? You know what
of
this
Steve
immediately
Rogers'
made me
youth.
think of? This immediately made me think of, and I was a huge fan of it. That's why I was looking so forward to his Spider-Man run, the Nick Spencer Cap run, the Hydra Cap, which I will
Yeah.
defend. I will defend to the ends of the earth. I really enjoyed that run. I thought it was innovative. I thought it was ambitious as all get out, and I thought it was really well done. And especially given the political climate of the time, like you had some. There's this one Red Skull speech from back, I think it was back in the 40s or something like that, and it sounded like a Trump rally. Like it was very poignant. So I'm definitely intrigued to see where this goes as well. Now, Dave.
Yeah, I think
Now,
it's
Dave, you are someone as a German-born person. You are very critical of overuse of Nazis. What are your thoughts on this?
I don't think that you could be overly critical about the use of Nazis in a Captain America story. The characters.
So is that something like
World
you
War II.
accepted that, like you accept, like it's this terms and conditions, and you just hit the accept when you open this book?
Yes, I think that if you're gonna deal with Captain America as a character, it's a little like Indiana Jones. Like Indiana Jones is gonna punch some Nazis.
Right.
Like it's part and parcel. And I'm all for Nazi punching.
Right.
I'm all for that. I think I'm less maybe critical of the overuse of Nazis and more critical of the overuse of Germans as the constant bad guys, if that makes sense, right? Germans are more than just Nazis, right? I guess that's really what I'm getting at. But when you open up a Captain America book, there better be some Nazi punching. Like that's part and parcel of the story. But even here, I think the texture of it is already very different, because the one big shot that we get of Nazis is, for all intents and purposes, American Nazis, right? Sympathizers, right? And that's texturally already a very, very different situation than what we usually get in a Captain America book. So the idea of, in the lead up to America's entry in World War II.
And before he's become Cap, even.
Yeah, and so seeing him in the lead up to America's entry into World War II, and kind of encountering this side of America, right? Like the sympathizers who thought, the Nazis were onto something. That is a really, really interesting thing. Like I find this approach to be fascinating. I'm very curious again to see where this is going. I think there's great potential here, and it's kind of fun to read a Straczynski comic book again. Like he just has a very, very specific feel to how he writes a comic book.
Well, it's sometimes it can be like going to see like an old band that you love so much and they don't quite have it anymore, but he still got it, man. He still got it. And so much so that I don't know if I can eat a sandwich that looks like that for a couple days. I might be a little triggered.
Oh, that's probably fair. Okay, so our next book on the list is a complicated one, I think, for you, and I have complicated feelings about it as well from a different perspective. Actually, from several different perspectives. So I'm very interested to talk about The Flash #1, which features Saiz Spurrier on writing duties and Mike Deodato Jr. on art. Got feelings about that. But Kris, let's go ahead and start with your take on this book.
I want to make my preconceived notions very clear before I comment on this book. I'm sure Saiz Spurrier is a fantastic chap. And this is not me like going after a creator. This is not me. I strongly dislike the majority of what Saiz Spurrier has done to one of my all-time favorite characters in comics, with what he's done with Nightcrawler. It started off really promising. I nerd commended Way of X #1. That particular series ended incredibly poorly, in my opinion. It was a really bad look for the character. Some really unfortunate, I would assume unintended consequences of treatment of a black woman, and kind of the farming of her trauma and the physical violence that took place towards her and her family was really deeply uncomfortable, and I don't think I've been able to recover. There are also just like story notes that not the direction that I see my beloved character going in. So I had to come into this book with that. Then you combine that with, this is not new reader friendly. It's not. The only thing I know about Wally West is that he's your favorite and that he's Barry's nephew. I think I knew that he was married to Linda. I think I knew that. So there's so much going on here. I think you and I share the same kind of feelings about Mike Deodato's art. It can be a coin flip for me. When you're hyper realistic in art, it can be a tricky needle to thread. the buffalo stuff looked cool. Bison are one of my favorite animals, so like just that part was cool. There's so much going on here. I was happy to see Mr. Terrific. I want to know more about him. That's one character for DC that I want to dive deep into. But he's very much just like a tertiary character here. There is an absolutely gorgeous moment right dead center in the middle of this book with Linda and kind of how she feels out of place in her own family as the only person who is not a speedster. And she is expected to hold down the fort and be a mother. And, you know, as someone who was raised by a strong mother, single mom for a couple years until she met my dad, like that was something I really connected with. You know, being a parent myself, that was really a special moment for me. The rest of it, I don't know what the heck is going on half the time, to be honest. Like and I think that might be intended. I don't know from your perspective. Like some of it's intriguing. Like the whole Speed Force is broken and he's in the broken place. The kids are doing some shenanigans as kids are wont to do. Yeah, I don't know what the heck is going on. Some of it was really cool, but I'm just completely just sitting here on most of it. Yeah.
It's weird to approach this book as a Flash fan because we just came off of a really, really good run that was sort of a what's the best way to put it? It's sort of a return to form for Wally as the Flash after the aforementioned Heroes in Crisis, right? You know, Wally has been in a weird place. And so it is, you know, this is sort of, the last run was sort of a return to form for him. And it was very positive and uplifting and fun. And because of that, it felt very much like classic sort of Flash storytelling. And I think this is something very different by design. I think the question becomes rather quickly whether this can work for the Flash. So to break it down for our listeners really quickly, the Flash is one of several speedster characters that all get their powers from something known as the Speed Force. And there's been, you know, various different explorations of what the Speed Force is, usually from a scientific perspective in the book, right? It's this power in the universe that the speedsters tap into, and it gives them their speed. But this book seems to postulate a less scientific and a more, not even spiritual, more of a supernatural approach to the Speed Force. And so what we're getting here is very much, you can feel it all over it. This is going to be a cosmic horror book. This is going to be, you know, Cthulhu in a nutshell. Like, this is what this is, right?
Cool. The last page looks cool. I will give it that.
This, yeah, it is, cosmic horror generally, you know, H.P. Lovecraft stuff. This is a cool storytelling device. I just wrote a cosmic horror story myself for an anthology. It's a cool genre to play in. The question becomes, is this a good place for the Flash? And I'm not 100% convinced after reading this as it is. So the question the book postulates basically is, what is the Speed Force? Is our understanding of the Speed Force accurate? And the Flash has always assumed the Speed Force is a force for good. Is it really that? Right? Or is it something different? Is there some evil out there in this supernatural force, right? Like Wally even at one point says, you know, it's totally scientific. It's totally scientific. Like he's trying to convince himself, right? And so this is definitely something that is very clearly moving into the cosmic horror realm. And it's interesting, right? I mean, there's an unease that goes through the book from the way the panels are laid out, to Wally's discomfort with what is happening to his powers.
One of his kids is crying. Yeah. There's a discomfort between him and his wife, right? I don't know if you've noticed that. But you know, he seems to be he said some sideways and she should have backhanded him for that.
Yeah, and that's very much not Wally.
Sorry, get your bleep button.
Character. Yeah, no,
I'm not. That just came out.
The pen is clicking. But you know, the thing is, This is also not Wally, right? Linda is, Linda is his lightning rod. Like, Linda is the reason that he does what he does, and he always comes back to her. She's really at the center of his universe. So for him to be very dismissive, dismissive of her struggles is sort of out of character for him. That's just not really how Wally operates as a character. Especially after everything he's just been through to get his wife and kids back. There's a lot of cosmic shenanigans and everything.
Do you see what I'm saying is one of your favorite characters and the voice is off?
Yeah, and here the voice is off. But I think it's also because they're trying to take a square peg and fit it in a round hole. I'm not exactly 100% sure that cosmic horror is a great place for the Flash. Now, maybe the book will go in and, like if you would take the Flash Wally out of this book and just say this is a story that we're doing about random superhero X who gets powers from somewhere that he doesn't know where they're coming from, and it turns out that the source of his power could be evil. That's interesting, right? But as soon as you use an established character like this, it almost feels a little too far off from what the core of the Wally West Flash character is.
I guess this is the continuing theme of this episode: is how are you going to put those toys back in the box when this run is over?
Yeah, I mean, if the final conclusion is that the Speed Force is not scientific but spiritual, then you have taken a very old concept in comics that has been very popular, and you've changed it on a fundamental level that is not something that you can undo very easily, right? And now all these future writers are going to have to deal with the consequences of that. It's going to be very difficult to go back to lighthearted, a lighthearted Flash Wally West family, shenanigans when you are postulating that some kind of evil elder god is the source of the Speed Force or something, right? So I'm unsure about this book. I'm also unsure about the art, and this is as somebody who liked 90s Mike Deodato Jr. Like, he did a run on Wonder Woman around the time of the contest, I think, and Artemis was Wonder Woman for a little while in that era and everything, and his art there was really cool for very 90s, obviously, but very, very cool. This is different. I think it works in one respect is because it's kind of bumping this hyper realism of the art against the cosmic horror that's coming. That's not a bad choice. But I think the thing that kind of took me out of it the most was just that the photo references were so obvious. Like, did you notice who Wally is in these reference pictures? It's Chris Evans. If you go back and you look at several of the shots of Wally, it's basically shots of Chris Evans as Captain America. The hairstyle even kind of is reminiscent of that. The face, very much so. It's a very photo-referenced Wally, Chris Evans as Wally West, And maybe that's one of the things that took me out of it. Yeah, man, I think this would be a really interesting book if it wasn't a Flash book. The fact that it feels like the voice is off, and I'm not sure if this is the right sandbox for the Flash to play in. I think that's really what got me about the book. It's aptly written. The art is, works for the story being told, I guess, although I think it's a little too photo-referenced. Yeah, I just think it's a little off right now, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll snap into place. Maybe it'll get better as it goes. But right now, it feels a little off, especially considering that the run we got right before that was really, really good.
Yeah, your experience sounds exactly like my reaction to the Nightcrawler books over the last 3 or 4 years. Like, there are some moments where it has some really beautiful moments, like the Linda moment I mentioned, where it's really well scripted and well written, but then there are just so many elements that don't seem like a good fit. I do want to follow up because I know this is something you love, and apropos for this month, the solicit after the final page is Sergeant Rock versus the Army of the Dead, written by none other than Bruce Campbell.
I can't wait for that book. I really can't. That is going to be fascinating. I'm here for it, man. All right, so we have one more, and this one is definitely a very, very different situation, and one that I'm very much looking forward to talking about because I have feelings, man. This is Rare Flavours #1. I think it's from Boom Studios, right? Written by Ram V and art by, I'm going to butcher his name, Filipe Andrade.
You nailed it.
Hey, I'm working on it. And so this one, I'm not even sure how to describe. You have a immortal food enthusiast who also happens to be a cannibal and is hiring a young filmmaker to help him make a documentary about food. And yet, as cray-cray as this description sounds, this was one of the more resonant new books that I've read. Kris, what was your take on this one?
Yeah, listen, this is for those of you that might be new to this is the same creative team that did one of my favorite books of the last 5 years, probably, The Many Deaths of Layla Starr. And so immediately when I saw this dream team getting back together, I was like, all right, I'm in. And then it really is very clear and open about what it is. You have, Ramvi, being someone of South Asian descent, writing about South Asian life and culture, very appropriate. I believe India. I'm not certain, but well, the story is set in India, but I believe he's from India as well. That's what I mean. But it's just really cool. You immediately get like this heroic painting of, like, to start off with, and like this folklore and religious tale. Like, it's really, really cool. And then you see the juxtaposition of this large beast that's being conquered with our protagonist, if we can call him a protagonist. I guess he's our main character. He's a bad guy, and so kind of seeing a bad guy as like our focal point is fascinating enough. But like, as someone who watched Anthony Bourdain religiously, like, this was a really cool callback to like all of Bourdain's shows, and like how what I was crushed when he passed. And what I loved about Bourdain is, like, yes, you got the food, but the food was just a vehicle to tell you about these people and their way of life and their culture, their language, their lifestyles. Like, and so like it was almost like a call. It was a very clear callback to that. And then you have these two equally enigmatic characters that are following him around. There's so much going on here that is yet to be revealed, that I'm fascinated by. And then you just have like this beautiful storytelling where, like, you're telling the character's backstory, who has the recipe for, this is chapter 1, masala chai, which I love a good chai. And then you have like the story of how they got the recipe and their life story, but then like the recipe is equally intertwined with that. Like, it's just so cool the way that this is told. Like, it's just a fascinating read, and I cannot wait for more.
The art's gorgeous. That up front. But also, I think I really want to mention that I find Ram V to be an incredibly humanistic writer, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yes.
Like, his main focus, although he oftentimes deals with the fantastical and with gods and supernatural beings, you get a sense that his main focus is people, regular everyday people, and their lives and their struggles and their difficulties, and you get that sense very clearly in The Many Deaths of Layla Starr, as the main character kind of weaves in and out of people's lives, right?
I screenshot this one. Listen to this. I'm quoting directly here. Monsi, I am always suspicious of a place where you cannot see the stars, Sai. I fear without that great reminder of our cosmic insignificance, we shrink our world to the point of solipsism, which is selfishness. As if the sky were but a ceiling you could touch. How unromantic would that be? And that's from our evil protagonist.
Yeah. And you know, the whole chai story about the guy he got the recipe from, right, is so interesting because it is such a human story.
References the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very lived in real thing. And to me, as very, insignificant, unsuccessful writer. And that's the thing that interests
You're
me
a published writer.
most.
Stop downplaying. You are published, okay?
To me, that is the most interesting thing about telling a story, right? I mean, the if you're writing horror, the scary stuff is fun, and if you're writing action, then obviously the fighting stuff is fun. But if you don't have a real interest in people and how they are affected by situations, it's all very superficial. And Ram V is just the exact opposite of that. Just as a writer, he is so interested in the human condition and in who people are and what their struggles are, and I just appreciate that about his work above everything else. I think that is just it's just the best thing about how he writes. And so that little interlude where we get the story of the guy who the recipe came from is my favorite part in the whole book, because it feels so real and lived in and honest, I guess is the best way to put it. To me, writing fiction is basically an attempt at telling the truth through lies, if that makes sense. And so the story is a lie, but the emotional content of it is truth. And that it's beautiful, man. It's just a great scene and a really strong first issue.
It's so weird because you're like, in some ways you're rooting for this character. I don't know why I want this documentary to be made, but I absolutely do. And then he's clearly manipulating this young filmmaker who is given up on his craft, who's quit film school or what have you. And he comes back and he's like, I'm going to do it because it was good chai. And I'm like, and as someone who is interested and intrigued by the culinary world, and how much good food can really just pull you in and make you excuse. You could go to a place, Dave, with that has the worst customer service, but the food's good. You don't care. It's just and that's part of that hyper realistic lived in world. I'm just so fascinated. Also, my other big takeaway is I can't wait to go punt back and read his Detective Comics work. I never would have found myself interested in reading Detective Comics before this. And I think you and I were chatting beforehand of this goth horror vibe that readers have said that he kind of cultivates in that. I'm like, oh, sign me up.
No, I totally agree. I'm definitely going to have to check it out. Alrighty, folks, there you have it. Those are the 4 first issues that we checked out for you. What are your thoughts about Wonder Woman, about Captain America, about The Flash, and about Rare Flavors #1? Find us on social media. Let us know. We are pretty much everywhere that social media can be found, at Nerd Byword or individually at That Nerd Dave and at That Nerd Kris. All right, let's take a beat, and when we come back, it's time for another Nerd Nightmare. Ladies and gentle people, welcome back. It is still the spooky season, which means that it's time for All right, and this week we did something a little different. Once again, trying to scare the pants off of Kris, we watched Cabin in the Woods. Here is the official tagline. When 5 college friends arrive at a remote forest cabin for a little vacation, little do they expect the horrors that await them. One by one, the youths fall victim to backwoods zombies, but there is another factor at play. 2 scientists are manipulating the ghoulish goings-on. But even as the body count rises, there's yet more at work than meets the eye. The movie was released on April 13th, 2012, was directed by Drew Goddard, and features a screenplay by Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon. The budget was $30 million. Also features some noteworthy individuals in the cast, including Jesse Williams, who I believe was a mainstay on Grey's Anatomy for quite a while, Chris Hemsworth of Thor fame, and very, very notable, I love this guy, Bradley Whitford, as one of the scientists.
Richard Jenkins. Don't forget Dr. Doback from Step Brothers.
Okay. That's fair. I'm just a very big Bradley Whitford fan. I think the guy's just a whole nother level.
That was the first thing that I said to you in our text exchange last night.
Yeah, that guy is just a whole nother level. So, anyways, Kris, as is usual, I'm really interested in your take on this movie first. Um, it definitely seems to have had an impact on you, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Get your clicky pen ready. This was fucking genius. I loved this movie. Like, I thought it was so smart. It was ambitious. It went for it. Like, this was I love meta stuff. Like, I'm a very macro person. I like meta stuff, and this was so ambitious. I understand your trepidation because he who shall remain nameless, although already named, uh, was one of the driving forces behind this. So now we've got to separate art from artist. But thankfully, Drew Goddard is there, and to my knowledge, hasn't done anything untoward. Um, but I also looked at Drew Goddard's work when clicking on his IMDb, and he's been in other stuff that I've dug as well. I really dug Cloverfield. I was really fascinated by that. It was really really cool. And so like also created the Netflix series Daredevil. Like, so shocker, like that. I liked this. I thought it was just so smart. I thought it was so smart. It turned everything on its head. I think the fact that it was so meta and it was a satire and there was humor and like it completely divorced any of the violence for me. I wasn't scared like for a moment in this film. Um, I texted you like this may have unlocked something for me. So don't hold me to that, but this like it was I think it was so freaking smart. Like I love the system reboot was the biggest mind bleep that I have ever experienced in a movie where you have all of these possible characters just wreaking total havoc. And then like to have full spoilers, because why are you listening to this if you haven't seen this movie? The fact that like this is all just a ritual sacrifice for another theme for today, the elder gods or whatever, the ancient gods or whatever. And if this is not a successful ritual, then they will be released, they will rise. um and that is like maybe I'm going to I honestly felt like Marty, like this entire movie. Shouts to Marty, one of my favorite characters in a horror movie I've ever seen. Like, dude was smoking the good stuff because it was like Sherlock Holmes, like opening levels to his brain of like enlightenment he was being achieved with whatever was in his supply. But I kind of felt like him because I was like, this is such a metatextual thing on like the humankind. Like the fact that Japan has its own branch, that Stockholm has its own branch, that like this is what we do, and it's all to satisfy the bloodlust of humanity. We are the elder gods because they do this for our entertainment. It's the gladiators all over again. It's the Colosseum. Like, why do we watch horror movies? It's the bloodlust in the human condition. I'm just, it's so good. The one of the funniest things is like Hemsworth, like can't help but be Thor, and maybe that's the pheromones. And oh, that was the other part that was so cool. Is like watching the controlled environment that they're in. They're releasing pheromones. They're releasing chemicals to kind of influence the human behavior. Was fascinating. And so maybe that was part of it, but like, yeah, he was just Thor with a haircut before Ragnarok. Like he couldn't help but be Thor, and like having the dumbest possible death of like I'm gonna evil Knievel this crap, and then yeah, how did that end for you? I love the fact that they turned the end on its head. The ending was chef's kiss, and like just having that elder god hand come and just smash all of it was just perfect for me.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you said. I think, as a longtime horror fan, there's so much going on here, playing around with archetypes. With things that we see over and over again with the tropes in horror movies, with the cookie cutter characters that are just being lined up for sacrifice, the slutty girl, the jock that's dumb, right? But it's all twisted around. Like, the jock is not actually dumb. They're just making him dumb, right? The way they play with the expectations that longtime horror fans in particular have is so much fun. The lake that they go to looks straight out of Friday the 13th.
Also, sorry, the Latin gets you every time. Stop
don't read
reading the Latin.
I love that Marty immediately pointed that out. He was like, yeah, I draw the line at the Latin. Let's not read the Latin. Like, but yeah, that's the correct reaction if you're in a horror movie. Don't read the Latin. But the lake, very much Friday the 13th. The cabin, very much Evil Dead. At one point when they're in the basement, right, and they have all these different things, and each object that they're playing with could be one different scenario that they go into.
Cool. No, Bradley Whitford's character clamoring for a merman. Just please, I want a merman so bad. And then the fact that after the system reboot, he's killed by a merman, and it like makes him happy as he's dying, was just so perfect.
Yeah. But there's like this ball that they play with in the basement, right? That's like a puzzle, and they're moving it around, and it very much is reminiscent of like the puzzle box in the Hellraiser franchise, right? So there's all these different elements here, man, that are so clearly references, tips of the hat, but not in a we're ripping them off kind of way, and more of an we get you, like we get the horror franchise. But I think you nailed it when you said that the smartest and best thing about this movie is that we are the elder gods. Like, we can talk about, the elder gods and the sacrifice, blah, blah. It's all a nice plot point. But the point repeatedly is, and I pointed this out to my wife as we were rewatching it too, is that we are the elder gods, right? The notion that we are wanting the sacrifice. At one point, Bradley Whitford's character is like clamoring for Jules to take her shirt off, right?
Yes.
And this one guard is like, don't you think this is a little in bad taste?
That was a really interesting meta character as well, the security guard. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Bradley Whitford's character, Steve, he's like, we're not the only ones watching. We got to give our audience what they want. And it's like, there's always that character, that like takes their shirt off in every horror movie, it feels like, if it's R-rated, there is going to be nudity. And it's like, we're the elder gods. These are the things that horror movie fans are looking for. That's what we're clamoring for. They're actually doing all these things to satisfy us, turning real people into, cardboard cutouts into stereotypes, so they behave a certain simple way so they can be led to the slaughter. It's a commentary on the horror genre and a commentary on horror fandom, all wrapped into a really, really fun horror movie.
I said
this is the kind of smart you don't get usually.
This is what I said. I said it's a horror-tinged love child of Rat Race and The Truman Show.
It's really something, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's so
with
weird
a little
to
bit
me.
of Death Race in there. You remember Death Race? Where they were like betting on who was going to win, like these convicts. Yeah.
And it is such a typical movie for Hollywood that went completely marketed wrong, in that they didn't market it at all.
It
It's
was
like
delayed,
a meta movie or something.
It was delayed and all this different stuff. Financial
and
difficulties.
it's so forgotten now too. Like this movie is what, 12 years old or something, and it's so forgotten. And as far as like the horror genre, it's easily one of the smartest things in horror that I've watched. So I think this is, not to be, hey, one of those people, but this is a real hidden gem. This is a classic of the horror genre that too many people don't really appreciate. And It's very sad to me because it's so smart and so interesting. And why is there not a sequel? Because, well, let's be honest. How do you make a sequel to a movie that literally ends the world? Oh, dude. Also, the Japan branch. I loved that the Japan branch, when we saw like them on the screens, that it was so perfect J-horror. It looked like something from like
it looked like the
Ringu or from or The Grudge, or it's very like in your face J-horror.
The Grudge.
Like,
thank you. I couldn't think of it. Yes, The Grudge. Yes.
Yeah, and that's what this is. Like, it's like, hey, this is Japanese horror, so these are the kinds of things that branch draws on, right? It's like such an understanding of the horror genre. It's so rare that you get people making horror movies that understand not just how to make a scary movie, but understand how the genre works, on a fundamental level. That's a very, very cool movie. And I'm glad you enjoyed it so much. I thought this one might be interesting to you, but seeing you enjoy it this much just makes me very, very happy.
This is right up there with It Chapter 1 as like the ones that I've enjoyed the most. Far and away.
Fantastic, man. Alrighty, folks, there you have it. Another nerd nightmare has passed. What did you think of Cabin in the Woods? Do you remember this one? Find us on social media and let us know what you think. We are on Twitter and Instagram, Twix, and Instagram and all sorts of other platforms at Nerd Byword, and individually at That Nerd Dave and at That Nerd Kris.
And the call to action. We need you to, if you like what you hear today, make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it, we're there, including nerdbyword.com, a fancy, new, sexy website by Dave that has been revitalized and updated. And as always, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, two nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.